Okay, so we are looking at the wrap up of the war at the Peace Conference of Versailles. So, the effort of the Treaty of Versailles is to try to create a secure peace, a peace that will be maintainable and where everybody will feel comfortable. How to do this? How to create a secure peace? How to prevent future war? And how to sort of cut up the old empires and create a logical series of new countries. This is not very easy to do, largely because Eastern Europe is a flipping mess of just like ethnic backgrounds and religious beliefs and diversity. And the problem was is that both sides really approach this from the standpoint of the idea that, well, those Slavic people, they're all the same, just put them in one place. So they essentially created two countries out of the Balkans, Yugoslavia and Czechoslovakia. And Yugoslavia received parts of the old Austro Hungarian Empire, and Czechoslovakia received parts of the old German Empire as well as the Austro Hungarian Empire. Austria was actually divided up and cut into pieces into Austria and Hungary separately, with bits and pieces of it being given away. Germany was cut up and parts of it given to Czechoslovakia, parts of it given to Poland, parts of it given to France. Problem is that in many cases, these people really don't like each other. The Slovenians, the Slovakians, and the Czechs don't all get along with each other. Similarly, in Yugoslavia, you had the Croatians who were Catholic, the Bosnia Herzegovinians who were Muslim, the Serbians who were Orthodox, and they all hated each other and they all wanted to kill each other. And now they're supposed to sort of get along well. Now, it's also true that France, England, Italy, and Japan all expect something out of this peace agreement, and they all want to be made happy, and Wilson wants to make them happy. France's big concern is security and payback, and more than any other country, France really wanted Germany punished. England wants stuff. They want Germany's colonies, as well as maybe some other colonies, especially the Ottoman colonies. Italy had switched sides, and even though they got beat up by Austria, they expected to get something for being on the winning side. Sort of like that bench warmer on a World Series team. And for the Japanese, it's all about being recognized as an equal, legitimate country to every other one and being an equal and legitimate player on the international scene. The only country that wants nothing is the United States. And Woodrow Wilson is kind of dumb enough to believe that other people should be happy with nothing too. Now, in order to sort of go along with Wilson's idea about ending empires, not only do you cut Germany and Austria Hungary literally into pieces, but you also need to divide up the non European parts of them. So these non European parts were divided up and primarily given to Japan for the Pacific region, England, and France for areas of Africa and Asia, under something that's called the mandate system. A mandate is a fancy word for an order or you know a decree. So these colonies, specifically the foreign colonies of Germany and the Ottoman Empire, were divided up and given away with the idea that someday down the road, at some point in time, these places would be given independence. When that will be, nobody's really quite sure, but they will be given independence. Germany itself, in Article 23 of the Treaty of Versailles, There is a section known as the War Guilt Clause. Germany must agree to accept complete responsibility for the war. And as a result of this, they are no longer allowed to have a military of any kind. They have a 100,000 man police force that cannot have machine guns, artillery, tanks, planes, or large scale naval vessels. They can have like a Coast Guard, basically. In addition to this, Germany is expected to pay $3 billion in cash, two-thirds of which go to France and Britain as payment for the war. These really are the requirements of the French, by the way, on the Germans. The British and the Americans feel really, really bad about this, but they kind of go along with it to keep the French happy. Now, Germany is completely bankrupt. They have no money. So how are they going to pay off $3 billion? By the way, $3 billion in today money is probably in terms of like spending value is probably equivalent to around like 2 or 300 billion. Um, Another way to look at this though is that $3 billion back then was the like greater than the entire budget of the country of Germany for a year, which in modern terms is probably closer to about $2 trillion. That's a lot of money to be paying off. That money, by the way, is going to be bankrolled and financed by the United States. And when the Germans give it to the British and the French, they're going to use it to pay back the loans that they took from us back in the war. So we're like paying ourselves. So Wilson is gone for nearly 6 months, and he comes back and submits the treaty to the Senate. Because remember, Senate is the one who must approve treaties negotiated by the president. Now, things have changed a lot since Woodrow Wilson went off to the peace conference. In 1918, in the elections, the Republicans won control of the Senate. Woodrow Wilson did not bring any Republicans with him to consult on the writing of the treaty. So when he comes back, he's kind of shocked to discover that the Republicans feel like they've had no say in anything and they don't like certain things. The leader of the Republican opposition is the head of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and probably the most powerful Republican in Congress at that point, a guy named Henry Cabot Lodge. In full disclosure, I honestly thought that that was the name of a hotel where members of Congress stayed, the Henry Cabot Lodge, but it's actually a guy. And Lodge goes through the treaty and picks it apart. And aside from the whole war guilt thing, the area that he really has a problem with is Article 10 of the treaty. Because they're using Roman numerals, that would be Article X. Article 10 basically compromised U.S. sovereignty. That's the ability of the U.S. to run itself by saying that as a member of the League of Nations, if any country in the League was attacked, the U.S. automatically agreed to go to war to defend it. And this did not sit well with how America's constitutional system was set up. And Lodge did not like it. And many Republicans were also uncomfortable. And quite frankly, even some Democrats were a little uncomfortable with it. For months, arguments go back and forth. Lodge presents a solution. He he has a statement known as the 14 reservations or concerns about the treaty, which, by the way, that number is chosen deliberately to mirror and to sort of juxtapose with Wilson's 14 points. And what it boiled down to was the League needed to be removed from the treaty and treated separately. And Article 10 needed to be readjusted so that the US could go along with it. Otherwise, everything was okay. The Republicans actually checked with the Europeans, and the Europeans were okay with this idea. They had no problem with the rearranging of things and restructuring of it. The person who had the problem with it was Woodrow Wilson, who basically did an all or nothing. This is what my son used to do when, like, we asked him what he wanted for dinner, and he's like, Cocoa Puffs. And we would say, you can't have Cocoa Puffs. And he'd go, then I'll have nothing. Well, this is Woodrow Wilson's attitude. Wilson basically came out and said that the Senate were like a group of children who refused to take medicine that was good for them because it tasted bad. And the Senate must learn to take its medicine. And that it was either all his way or no way at all. So the Senate gave him what he wanted, which was no way at all. They reject the treaty outright. So why would Wilson have been stubborn like this? Well, part of it was probably arrogance, but also, which was unknown at the time, Wilson had been suffering from a series of strokes that probably affected his judgment. Um, and in fact, he got so sick after a public appearance to support his treaty proposals that he was removed from public eye for a while, and his wife actually ran the country because he was that sick. The Senate didn't care anything. They just basically said, fine, if you're going to be that way, it's all or nothing, then I guess you'll have nothing. And the U.S. rejected the Treaty of Versailles. There's a really big ironic failure here. The U.S. completely rejects the Treaty of Versailles. We actually make a separate treaty with Germany in 1921, officially ending the war. But as this couple of political cartoons of the time show, it's really kind of interesting the sort of the outcome of this. Now, notice here, okay? In this cartoon, you have this pigeon bird. This is actually a dove, the symbol of peace. And also, the symbol of peace is the olive branch, which is what Wilson is holding. But instead of being an olive branch, Wilson is holding an olive tree limb that he is going to jam into the mouth of the poor little birdie, basically implying that the League of Nations is going to kill off future peace. And it really does. And by the way, if anybody that looked like this approached my kids, after saying no, I'd shoot him. Just saying. Another one. This idea here that the bridge, the League of Nations bridge, designed by the President of the United States but never finished. The analogy is made here to Roman arches and the idea that what holds everything together is a keystone. And at this point in time, the United States is just not interested. And it's not just the Senate, by the way, it's the people of the United States who are really not interested in doing this. The League of Nations does set up. I mean, here's a picture of the League of Nations countries. Um, the dark gray ones, like Saudi Arabia, I think the little guy might be Qatar or something down there, Nepal, and the United States, and a random part of Canada, like in Nova Scotia. These are the only countries that never really join the League of Nations. Other countries join. The dark blue ones are founding members. The light blue ones are ones that joined, then left, then joined again. The green ones are countries that started the league and then left. The yellow ones came in later and then left after coming in late. The League of Nations proves to be an utter absolute failure. Um, One of the problems is that the way that our government was set up with the federal system, with power really lying with the states, and only a very limited amount of power being in the central government, did not allow for some kind of great world government organization to exist with us. And this led to a lot of people calling for the removal or the change of how the U.S. Constitution functioned. Germany was not initially let into the League of Nations because they weren't a peaceful country. They came in later, and then when Crazy Mustache Man came in, they kind of left again. Without the U.S.'s support, the League of Nations really can't do anything. It doesn't stop or prevent future conflicts. In fact, in some ways, it may have made the conflicts worse, which maybe we'll talk a little bit about in the next unit. Um, Also, as a sign of monumental failure, the United States invades Russia. Wilson, despite being a leftist progressive, did not like the communists, so he invaded Russia, which got a lot of progressives really angry. While in Russia, we don't do a lot. We occupy parts of Siberia for about a year or two, almost get into a war with Japan over a disagreement at a railroad station, and really leave having accomplished nothing except freezing and getting the Japanese angry. By 1920, the United States has had enough of progressives. In 1918, there was a pandemic, a legit worldwide pandemic, the Spanish flu, its name came from the fact that the first cases were discovered in Spain at hospitals for the wounded. Spain was a neutral country, and both sides used Spain as a hospital region. The first cases were diagnosed there. Virologists later traced the Spanish flu back and discovered that it actually originated in China, not unlike COVID 19. Um, and the US reaction was very similar to what we did during the coronavirus pandemic. Um, we had quarantines, we had wearing of masks, we had public functions canceled. Um, in the end, proportionally, the Spanish flu epidemic is one of the worst epidemics in human history. It infected or killed off nearly a fifth of the world's population, which is a lot bigger than what more modern plagues have ever accomplished. So it was the handling of the Spanish flu, the handling of the economy after the war, which kind of tanked without the war there to support it, the handling of the whole issue of the Treaty of Versailles that led to, in 1920, the Republicans winning this presidency, the House, and the Senate. And thanks to Tubby Taft, who had appointed conservative judges, they also control the Supreme Court. It is officially the end of the progressive era, which is what we'll talk about when we get in the next unit. This is the end of this unit. Peace and love.